All right, Starlink. There is barely a campsite you can go to around Australia where you will not find one of these dishes either on top of a caravan or plonked out in front of a tent. It has certainly changed the game when it comes to off-grid travel in Australia, but there's definitely some cons to the system as well. We're going to take you through all that and more, as well as a new product to the Australian market that we're really excited about that solves a couple of the biggest challenges and the biggest cons to the Starlink system. If you're thinking about going traveling, or if you're already out there traveling and you want connectivity while you travel to work on the road like we do, or just that you like to have your Netflix and you want to stay connected to the internet, stick around. We're going to run you through everything that we've learned about Starlink after having it for over 12 months now, as well as that new product to the Australian market that we think is an absolute game changer. Let's dive into it. So for us to get 4 and 5G into our van and around our campsite, we use a Cowfish 5G router. Now that router is connected to a 5G antenna on our roof that's permanently mounted, that just needs a 12 volt supply, and that runs all the time and gives us a Wi-Fi signal, as I said, in the van as well as around our campsite. That will actually transmit from the antenna on the roof, which is both a 4 and 5G receiver and a Wi-Fi emitter, up to 100 meters around our campsite. We've got a Wi-Fi signal as long as we've got a 4 and 5G connection. So how does Starlink fit into this? Well, up until pretty recently, they were two completely independent systems. We would just run our 4 and 5G when we had good connection, and when we didn't, we would unpause our Starlink plan, fire that up and run the Starlink for as long as we needed to, and this would get used infrequently in towns and things like that, but relatively little. As I said, that was until recently. What's changed the game, and what we think is probably one of the biggest advancements to Starlink in Australia, and something we're really excited about, is this little box up in here which I installed recently. This is what's known as the Cowfish Starlink integration module. In effect, what that does is that takes the signal from the Starlink satellite dish, runs it through the Cowfish router. Now, one of the advantages of that is it means we can just do away with the Starlink router, the one that comes supplied with the unit. But one of the other big advantages is that that is now a 12 volt solution. It now has removed the need for us to need to run an inverter when we need to run the Starlink. Now, the advantage of now that we can run it through the 12 volt in this is that we are now able to run the whole thing off 12 volt, and we can pretty much leave our Starlink on all the time, and we're only going to use that 5 or 6 amps that the Starlink itself uses, which is a massive improvement. It also means that if you're traveling and don't have an inverter in your setup, you now no longer need an inverter just to be able to run your Starlink. So you can run it from your car or your canopy setup if you're traveling without a caravan or a trailer. So when it came to installing the Starlink integration kit in our van, putting it as close as you can to the Cowfish router makes the most sense. We had this space up the top of the back of the overhead cupboard where we had already installed our Cowfish router, and it also allowed relatively easy access into the back of our electrical system. We've also got this little fuse box there up in the top cupboard where all our switch gear is, that had a spare circuit there, so I was able to just plug straight into that to get the 12 volt power to the Starlink integration kit. Apart from that, it's just using the supplied RJ45 lead to connect it to the Cowfish router, and then you just need to run a secondary lead from the Starlink integration unit down to wherever you install the plug that will connect your Starlink from the outside of the van. So the other solution that Cowfish offer is this thing here. Now, this is only half of it. I've already installed the other half, but this is a waterproof, dust-proof connection. So you can put a hole into the side of your van, or in my case, I put it up through the floor, and this will give you a connection from the Starlink dish straight into the van, and then a patch lead or an RJ45 cable goes from that up into the Starlink integration kit, which then sends the signal to the Cowfish router. The downside to this is you do have to cut your Starlink cord and just put an RJ45 connection directly onto this cable, and then this waterproof connection is an RJ45 waterproof connection. Overall, for us, having both a 4 or 5G and a Starlink solution just means that we have got internet and connectivity just about everywhere in Australia, and it also is the best solution for us because of schooling that we do with the kids, the business that we run on the road, and all of that sort of stuff. Just internet is very important to us, but it may not be as important to you, so you may decide you only want one of the two solutions. what Cowfish have done for those of you that may not want a 4 and 5G router and you just want the 12 volt Starlink, they've done what's called the Cowfish Zero, which is exactly that. It's just the 12 volt component for your Starlink. It won't give you 4 and 5G, but it is a 12 volt router for your Starlink, which is a really good option. It's also a little bit more cost effective if you don't want to spend as much money on hardware as it would cost you to do a 4 and 5G solution. They have also given us a discount code, so you can get 10% off any Cowfish gear on their website, including the Starlink integration kit and that Cowfish 4.5G modem. So if you think this is for you and would suit your setup, then head over to the Cowfish website. I'll leave a link in the description below and chuck in that code and save yourself some dollars as well.